Department of Homeland Security has the lowest morale score among the cabinet agencies in the best places to work rankings every year for the past 10 years. The Atlantic Council has a new look at how to get the agency's morale and mission back on track. Tom Warrick is a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security for Counterterrorism Policy. Tom, welcome. Thanks very much for coming on the program. What are the biggest issues that you think DHS is up against right now?
Right now, DHS needs to refocus its mission. The most urgent threats to the country are very different from what they were on 9/11, which was the reason the department was founded, or even as recently as 2016. Right now, DHS needs to focus first and foremost on COVID-19, being able to distribute materials, medical supplies, testing supplies, and ultimately, we hope, a vaccine. Second, DHS needs to prioritize against what Russia, China, and Iran are doing through a combination of cyber operations, attacks on elections infrastructure, spreading disinformation, amplifying divisive voices within the United States. All of this is aimed at weakening American power. And what we recommend is that this needs to be the priority mission to defend democracy in the United States, our internet, the way we have elections as an American affair. This needs to be DHS's second priority. And finally, over the long term, DHS has to prioritize the response to climate change or extreme weather. Because those events can cost American lives and severely damage America's infrastructure into the billions of dollars. And preparing for those sorts of things is the kind of work that takes years, is often done out of the limelight, and requires close partnership with the private sector and state and local governments. We also looked at reforming the way DHS approaches public-private partnerships, because DHS doesn't command things. Instead, it leads and coordinates. And we did take a look at the morale issue, which is one of the most long-standing problems DHS has, and it actually can be broken down. There are ways to improve it. There are success stories at DHS that should be models for the rest of the department. And then finally, there are some basic fundamental challenges. The department is too decentralized. It doesn't get the benefit of the different kinds of expertise that DHS has, and needs to do a much better job of some of the basics of how it communicates to the American people and to its own workforce.
You and your colleague, Caitlin Durkovich, that put this work together, wrote, I think the most powerful thing in this entire work is if DOD's bumper sticker version of its mission is we fight and win America's wars, DHS needs to think of its mission as we lead the defense of the nation against non-military threats. What do you think causes DHS to not, at least publicly, focus that laser-like onto what its mission is?
Part of it is the decentralized nature of the place. Employees have a loyalty to the particular part of DHS, which it calls components, and not to the department's mission as a whole. Secretaries of both parties have tried to bring the department together. The key thing that we were struck by was the fact that DHS has a role that everybody in the government really needs to understand better, so that when the president is sitting around the cabinet table, if a threat comes in, whether it's from a nation state or from a pandemic disease or anything else, the question is, if it's military, everyone turns to DOD. But if it's not military, people need to look to the Secretary of Homeland Security to lead the nation's defense.
What turbocharges that in your view? What drives that? Or is it just the idea that the president and the president's advisors start to think the way that you just suggested they should think?
Well, what catalyzed this was the evolution since 2016 of the fact that Russia, China, and Iran have begun a campaign that tries to go after the United States through non-military means. This is actually revolutionary, and it's something that our experts across the think tank space, inside and outside of government, have started to realize. What they're trying to do is to stay just below the level of provoking a U.S. military response, because they know they can't defeat us on the battlefield. So instead, by dividing the United States, they hope to weaken American power. This needs to be the focus of the president and the president's top advisors, and they've really got to look to DHS, because this kind of a defense needs to be done through what states and local governments do on elections, what the private sector does to keep cybersecurity networks intact. And this is going to take a new approach for DHS and for the nation.
We have about a minute left. Excuse me, what about the morale issue at DHS? I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, is it possible that there are a sufficient number of jobs at DHS that are just really, really difficult and hard to do, that maybe morale will never be great at that agency, Tom?
Actually, that's one of the most interesting and compelling things. DHS employees, as much as they don't like aspects of how the place is run, are actually deeply committed to the mission. And in fact, there are some very specific problems. There are only two components of DHS, TSA and CBP, that do airline inspections and check passports, make up more than half of the workforce. If you could improve morale just at those two components, you could lift DHS out of last place. So this is a solvable problem. It takes focus and it takes money from the Congress.
Tom, thanks very much for coming on. Congratulations to you and Caitlin on this work. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.